Thank you for joining, everybody. We will begin the webinar in about 1 minute. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Michelle Fleming, and I'm the Director of Worldwide Partner Marketing for Saviynt. I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you for joining our webinar today on mitigating SOD risk and delivering PAM with intelligent identity and continuous controls in a modern IT environment. As businesses pick up speed with their cloud transformation initiatives, the need to meet internal audit controls over IT and SOX critical applications are forcing organizations to rethink their approach to managing identities and access. So if you're looking to learn more about how to easily identify, view, and manage SOD and enterprise security risk, no matter where it's hosted, you're in the right place. Let me go over a few housekeeping items before we begin the webinar. Please submit your questions in the Q&A or chat box. We'll address the questions at the end of the webinar, and a recording of the webinar will be delivered to your inbox within the next 24 hours. Joining us today is Connor Hammersmith, and Connor is the application GRC lead on our Saviynt Solutions Strategy team. He specializes in helping customers solve complex identity, security, and governance-related problems. In his previous role in professional services, he advised clients on their IAM and governance programs while leading teams implementing IGA and GRC technologies, remediating segregation of duty risks, and designing application security in ERP environments. His experience has helped him advise customers on how best to integrate their IGA and GRC programs to design more efficient risk-based government processes. Also with us today is Chris Patovisti, who's been working in the governance, risk, and compliance ecosystem for almost 2 decades. Currently, he is COO and Head of Delivery at LegionStar. In this capacity, Chris brings his experience in identity management, IT audit, ERP strategy, GRC security, and controls advisory in various industry verticals. Chris is a strong leader and has led multiple identity, security, and control teams. And unique to Chris's background is his ability to coordinate IT risk remediation strategies for companies that have identified an issue in their access control environment. Moving clients from a manual to automated basis, which includes governance within the system, builds a cost-effective solution that does not increase business overhead. And with that, gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you, Michelle, for that introduction. So thanks, everybody, for joining the webinar today. So real quick, I will just go over the agenda and what we plan to cover today. So first, we'll go over introductions for both Saviynt and LegionStar. We'll talk about a trend that we are definitely seeing in the market around the convergence of the identity governance and administration markets with the GRC market, more specifically around GRC access controls. Right. So we'll also discuss some of the common risk management challenges that Chris is seeing a lot of his customers experience. We'll talk about how customers are struggling to manage segregation of duties in modern IT environments that include a lot more applications than just the traditional ERP stack. And then we'll discuss how Saviynt can help customers solve these challenges. Chris will spend some time to discuss how to build a business case to help you implement a solution like Saviynt to drive efficiencies within your business, and we'll talk through some case studies there. We'll wrap up the conversation with discussing also a critical point around managing risk in your applications around privileged access management for ERP platforms. And then wrapping everything up with how to integrate these risk analytics into your business processes to make them more efficient, right? So as Michelle mentioned, my name is Connor Hammersmith. I am on our solutions engineering team here at Saviynt, and I lead our application GRC vertical, right? Chris?
Thanks, Connor. Thanks, Michelle. Very humbled to be here. I lead the Legion Star delivery team in all things Saviynt related. My background is a little bit more IT audit centric. I worked for Patovisti for about 4 years. That's where I started doing IT audit. Then I moved into an ERP security role, doing implementations and advising. And ever since, for about the past 6-7 years, I've been implementing identity access tools, such as Saviynt. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Chris. So, real quick introduction on Saviynt, right? So, if anybody that's not familiar with Saviynt, we have the Saviynt Intelligent Identity Hub. And this is where we are integrating with multiple authoritative sources to manage not just your employees within your organization, but partners, customers, contractors, and even non-human identities around workloads that may be running in the cloud or RPA bots within your organization or IoT devices. Saviynt can help you manage the life cycle of those identities throughout the organization. Not only is it just who has access to what in your ERP environment, but also as we integrate with cloud applications, that as your business processes span multiple applications, Saviynt serves as that intelligent hub to help you integrate and understand what access a user has across those applications, infrastructure, or data, right? And really we're trying to identify who has access to what does the access secure, and really at the end of the day, what is the risk to your organization? So Chris, want to talk about Legion Star?
Thanks, Connor. So Legion Star, the reason I put this slide in here is I wanted to start out on a quick note, just talking about the way that we approach our projects. And Saviynt has really kind of changed the game by incorporating the GRC component into the identity solution, right? So what we do as part of blueprinting for Saviynt is quite different than any of our other identity products, because now we can start the process up front. We don't have to include any other GRC teams from an implementation of the tool perspective, right? So if you look at this wheel that we have presented on the screen, this is a starting point for our approach team and the methodology that we take with all of our customers, key stakeholders. Around the table, right, we gather up the chief audit executive, we get the CISO, the CIO, we get the stakeholders committee in the room, and all of our sponsors for the project. And we walk through, these key aspects on the wheel. So first we start talking about different work streams and what are the risks within each of the work streams, and how can Saviynt, bring visibility to where those risks are, right? Doesn't matter what system we're talking about, right? No matter the work system, Saviynt has the ability to go in, analyze it, give visibility, and then conduct an SoD assessment, right? So it's system agnostic, which is really key in this. We can also, design the controls to be effective around cross-application systems as well as within each system, right? And then we can help assist the audit teams with testing, right? We've even got customers that rely on our implementation team to put in the correct set of analytics and controls up front so that then their internal and external teams can rely on that going forward. All that is to say that, we start to analyze and develop a methodology for identifying the risk all up front, right? What are the controls that we need per application? Do you have controls there already? Okay, let's start there as a starting point. Let's not put that work aside, right? Let's use that and incorporate that into the Saviynt tool. So when I say, conversion of those controls into Saviynt, it's easy peasy, so to speak, right? It's very quick and easy to put what you already have and build it into the Saviynt platform through their migration strategies. Also, as we kind of spin around the wheel, risk management training, right? It's very, very important for your risk management, compliance, and audit teams to have the ability to be trained on these tools, right? Now that you're putting in one glass pane, that gives you access to security and audit trails and identity, now you want your teams to fully integrate, right? Similar to an ERP does for the operations of a business, we want you to look at Saviynt as an identity tool, but it's also it's full blown to include your audit teams and your security teams as well. So we want to make sure that up front we get them involved and kind of incorporated into the tool so that it becomes part of them as we're rolling the tool out. Okay. And then monitoring is also a consideration up front as part of our blueprint and design, right? I mean, what are the things that your team needs to know about on a weekly, monthly, semi-annual, type basis, right? What are the key monitoring activities that we identify? So putting all of those pieces together and having a framework for those discussions is really, really important to achieving success at Legion Star with the customers that we go to bat with in implementing, this tool and making sure that their GRC environments are taken from an already existing state where they're already in a great position on the maturity model, or whether they're starting fresh. We can get them to that world-class identity solution just by blueprinting and talking about what the options are and where they want to be, and meshing those together up front with all the buy-in at the same time. So Connor, I think that's all I had. I kind of kept talking and talking, but I want to turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So over the next couple slides, I really want to spend a few minutes discussing a major trend that we're seeing in the industry, right? So as you'll kind of come to understand through our webinar today, Savient's approach is to provide you the capabilities you would traditionally see in an identity management platform and a GRC application that internal audit would use to manage segregation of duties risk from one application, and what are those benefits that can provide to the organization. So I firmly believe that there are a lot of benefits to that, and hence what we'll be talking about today. So in order to fully understand that, I wanted to start with the traditional approach to identity management. So a lot of times we talk to organizations where they have the kind of legacy mindset of an identity management program where they are just focused on automation and they want to drive efficiency during the user provisioning process. I want to create counts as fast as possible, which I definitely agree is important and can help you build that ROI, as Chris will talk about later. But I think there's more to it from a risk perspective, right? Because organizations were implementing identity management systems, but yet still failing audits, right? So internal audit departments went and procured and identified GRC solutions that could solve their security and compliance problems in those critical financial applications like SAP, Oracle, etc. Right? Some organizations that were mature enough integrated their identity management systems with GRC to perform a preventative segregation of duties risk analysis as part of the access request process. However, most organizations didn't do that, right? So you'll see as we're going through the presentation today where those are some of the major benefits that you can get by including that capability to analyze risk in your ERP applications or any other business applications at a fine-grained entitlement level, right? So that's where organizations had to go implement a GRC solution to look at risk at the transaction code and authorization object level in SAP, where identity management systems traditionally didn't get down to that level of detail. So I'll pass it on to Chris to talk about the traditional approach to governance, risk, and compliance applications.
Thanks, Connor. Yeah, so to piggyback off of what Connor said, right, a lot of the organizations in my previous experience have purchased an ERP, right, to solve all of their compliance issues. And typically my past approach, right, with the firms that I've been working with has been to include, that GRC piece as we implement ERP. But now the shift in the marketplace is to also include your identity management tool, right? Your identity access tool, such as, Saviynt, because now we can talk about how Saviynt can perform that same type of GRC monitoring that your ERP tool is already doing for you, plus more, as well as the breadth of the applications that we can cover in Saviynt by connecting to, SaaS applications is incredible, right? So now instead of being uniform or siloed into one technology, Versa / GRC for SAP, and, there's other, tools out there that are being sold that are typically one ERP centric, kind of like what Connor said. That severely limits, your exposure to the cross-application risks that are out there, right? There's other sensitivities and there's other applications that are risky for your user set to be using with the security that they have, and you don't even know about it, right? So how do we get to know about it? Well, that's where Saviynt comes in. Traditionally, that is a gap, right? If you're implementing SAP GRC, a lot of these tools are struggling to do what Saviynt is doing. They are struggling to implement, technologies that cover the form, if you will, or they don't umbrella up and are able to accomplish the same types of things security model wise and GRC reporting wise that a tool like Saviynt can do. What else happened in the past, right? So it happened because it had to, right? Segregation of duties is a must, right? I'm looking at the not all bad though, right? So if you are purchasing an ERP tool, you're doing so and you're pushing yourselves along that maturity model, which is a great way to begin that journey. But we almost contend that, Saviynt can be doing it alongside you as well, or in congruence with your ERP GRC tools, right? Because there are certain applications that a tool like Saviynt can integrate with that maybe your ERP compliance tool or GRC tool cannot. So if you are on that road right now, likely you're dealing with SOD and role redesign and trying to get your security to match your, role-based access or job-based access, whatever have you. And you might be, plugging into some legacy on-prem models or some, native tools or maybe even custom tools that you guys have designed within that ERP. Unfortunately, your ERP should not be your main repository for all of your identities in your organization, right? And an Active Directory, is in essence, it's a directory, and it may cover off on, 90% of your users, but it's also not going to understand or help you understand, what the finite security is for all of the different applications within your Active Directory user set. Now, some would contend that, typically federation, you might be able to achieve, a security model and insight using federation, but it's not, it's not at a point right now where it's massive scale, right? I've worked with organizations that are federating 100 to 500 apps, but yet they've got upwards of 4,000 other applications that are either on-prem or cloud that they also need to connect to, that they don't want to do so via Active Directory federation. So with the traditional approach, it doesn't quite meet the needs of today's GRC requirements from end to end at the business level, right? There's certain business processes, there's certain sensitivities, all the way from HR downstream to every single application that you have that needs to be included not only in your identity tool, but also across your GRC risk and assessment tools and landscape as well. And I think that's where Saviynt meets the mark, really, really well from our experience. Connor, I think I'm going to turn it over to you for Savient's approach.
Thanks, Chris. So to bring it all together, I wanted to wrap this up with explaining Savient's approach to identity governance and administration, right? I firmly believe that having the identity context of an individual, which those IGA solutions provide you that, by integrating with your HR system or systems and pulling in employees, contractors, etc., we can aggregate access that a user has across all of the applications and identify risk at the identity level, right? So not only does that span your ERP platforms like SAP or Oracle, or SaaS applications like Ariba or SuccessFactors, or anything that you may have in the cloud, but as well as infrastructure, right? You may have on-premise servers and databases, or servers and databases in the cloud, right? EC2 instances in AWS, right? Being able to incorporate all of that into your risk analysis and identify the risk to the organization. Not only are you being able to identify that SOD risk or sensitive access risk, but we're also taking full advantage of the automation capabilities that you would typically see from an IGA solution. Being able to manage role-based access control and birthright provisioning. Being able to automatically remove a user's access when they've been terminated in HR. Being able to automate the user access review process. So we'll talk about that a little later in the presentation as well. But the biggest difference is Saviynt provides those automation capabilities from an IGA solution, and Saviynt has the flexibility to consume those complex security hierarchies and architecture in ERP applications for you to run complex risk analysis on those applications and across applications. Saviynt brings this all together with continuous control monitoring capabilities so that it's not just a point-in-time assessment, but you can every single day analyze the risk in your environment and take action immediately, right? So I'll turn it over to Chris to discuss some of the common risk management challenges that we're seeing organizations struggle with.
Thanks, Connor. So, I mean, everybody kind of speaks to manual effort, right, when it comes to risk management, UAR, user access reviews, attestation, whatever have you. Being able to understand what the risks are in your environment. A lot of our customers bring us in and they still have spreadsheets Some of you might be laughing, but some of you aren't as well, right? Because I mean, it is kind of the current scenario for organizations to still, rely on some of these matrices, right? And when they're setting up access, whether it have you manual or automated, they're still having to rely on a separate Excel matrix to be able to make sure that any access that they're giving a user should not have X, Y, and Z, right? In its simplest form, just to talk about it that way. That's where a lot of the effort can be more efficient by using a tool like Saviynt. If you can digitize, right, or if you can you throw that rule set into the cloud in a way that Saviynt can now understand it, Saviynt can now tell you where your SODs are. Saviynt can now tell you where your sensitive access pieces are, right? So the common scenarios that we see, number one, is that there's a lot of manual effort being conducted where these SOD assessments on the front end as preventative, as well as on the back end as detective, are spending a lot of hours, that the organization is paying for, whether it be through vendors, contractors, or internal resources and staff. It doesn't matter. The conversation continues to come up over and over that we need to get rid of, these manual processes, once and for all, because we've got too much labor being expended on this one, compliance type task. Another one is that there's cross-application SODs, right? There might be sensitive access or SOD implications in HR, in Workday financials, in Oracle, in any ERP, in any application, AWS for instance, right? All of those different applications, whether they're cloud bound or whether they're on-prem, it doesn't matter, right? If you're not able to be fully comfortable as an audit team, that one person, maybe they, as a developer, they can't move XYZ code from development and pre-prod platforms into production, but maybe on the back end in AWS, they might have access to databases and other resources in AWS on the infrastructure side that you may not want them to have anyway, right? So it kind of messes with your whole model altogether if you're not considering the entire landscape of your applications and now your infrastructure, because Saviynt can do infrastructure security modeling and GRC as well for AWS, Alibaba, etc. So that's another common risk management challenge that we see in the marketplace is everybody wants to not only think about one application now, they want to think about multiple, right? And I'll go into that a little bit later about how that looks in the system and why that's really important. Another challenge is that there's privileged or sensitive access inside critical applications. Well, imagine now if you can design a report in Saviynt to say who has access to sensitive access in HR, sensitive access in Oracle, sensitive access in Salesforce, etc. And you can monitor that at will, right? A lot of people, roll their eyes at sensitive access, but when you start building the case across your landscape and you're showing who has visibility to these, special purchase orders, to pricing, as well as who the vendors are, right? Now you're talking about, somebody having the ability to snitch, right? And to go to competitors and be able to take that recipe for success. So maybe you want to mitigate that and reduce that amount of exposure, across your applications, right? So sensitive access and privileged access through Saviynt can be, a common use case for how we overcome that challenge at organizations. Just looking at my list here, another one that's common is systems that have limitations, right? There's legacy applications out there, such as like a GRC, for instance, right? SAP purchased Versa, they turned it into GRC. SAP purchased Ariba, and now they're integrating Ariba into their landscape. We had a customer that said, listen, we've got GRC, but we also have Ariba, and Ariba, hasn't been fit into the mold of GRC yet. So, can you help us with Saviynt in order to accomplish Ariba SOD reporting? And we said yes, and we showed them how to do it, and we put that, in form in their production box, and now they're benefiting at that large manufacturer from their Ariba processes, being able to identify what controls are in place, both systematic and manual, and they're using the advantages of Saviynt, being able to do its own SOD monitoring and prevention on the front end, right, when we're provisioning users into the Ariba model. So those are 3 or 4 of the common use cases, for some of these challenges that you see on the screen. But more or less, I just think it's a really powerful application, to overcome some of these challenges, right? Now that you're combining, identity on the front end, right? You can tackle the GRC challenges that you're having, not only within one application, not only within applications, right? Now we're talking about infrastructure too. So all from the front end, when you're requesting, whether it be birthright, whether it be job role change, a lot of these challenges are overcome, with the flexibility and the power that Connor's talking about. So moving on. So as we've got that flexibility and that power, just to make it a little bit more real for you, we put this slide in there into the deck, which talks about the security models as they've been broken out for each application. And trust me when I say that this is only a snippet of the applications that we're talking about, connecting to, right? These are just common ones that I wanted the audience to see today. When we're talking about an identity, or some refer to it as a heartbeat, right? The user at the top, now in Saviynt, is correlated or linked to all of the accounts that you've created for that particular heartbeat or user in your firm, right? So now Saviynt, with its powerful fine-grained access, it can tell you in Office 365 who has particular groups or SharePoint access, and what files and folders they have access to. Is it edit, access? Is it view only, etc.? What greater power, in your identity tool than having access to all of that in one place, right? Per user, right? And there's different ways to kind of, slice it. If you want to look at it from one user level, you can. But if you want to look at it from a folder or a file perspective, you can do it that way too. And Connor, I hate to say, maybe we should have designed a slide, that talks about, what that perspective looks like as well. I mean, if I wanted to see who had access to the HR Social Security file that's in SharePoint, I can really quickly on the same screen, different area, pull that up and show our HR management team. Right? So their security models are designed for each application, and it's really powerful to be able to connect to that connector, right, for your application downstream. And all of a sudden in Saviynt, it knows about your security model in that application natively, right? So now we're just spinning up, a username and password that has the appropriate access to pull the information into Saviynt. And as long as we're reconning it, I would say, every day, typically, depending on the use case, we can see everything that's listed here in terms of entitlements and entitlement types for all of your users, for all of your service accounts, right? It's pretty powerful stuff to be able to go into Saviynt and say, okay, for, Heartbeat Chris Patovisti, I can see that he's got a E3 license. I can see that he's got access to, the consulting, SharePoint site, and he's got access to these particular files. Not only that, I can restrict him from getting access to the employee SharePoint site, right? If I condone that as part of the SODs within Office 365. So, I mean, we didn't speak about it yet, but not only can we do detective reporting on some of these SODs, but we can push it into the provisioning process, so it becomes, again, a preventative control, right? So Office 365 is just one example, but we've also got AWS, we've got Workday, we've got Workday Financials. I mean, the list goes on, right? It's all about the application first, using a Saviynt connector. If you can't, Savient's even got flexibility there, right? We can still bring in entitlements and entitlement types from web services, type calls, right? If you've got an application that we can connect to via REST or SOAP, great. Saviynt's got a connector for that too. We can bring all their entitlements in at a fine-grained level, and you can design, and we can help you, design the SOD rulebook to either detect SODs based on that fine-grained access within Saviynt, or prevent it as part of your provisioning process. So it's really neat. And if you see at the bottom of the slide there, it says that we can do same system or cross-system SODs. And that's true, and that's what we've been talking about, up to this point. Both Connor and I have mentioned that, but the cool thing is you can do this all with one universal risk matrix, right? Or one, I call it the golden rule book per se, right? Which gets a lot of laughs from customers, but it's achievable. And we've shown customers how to do that, and we've implemented it that way, so that they literally, as part of their audit team, they have one risk and control matrix for SODs, and it points to the Saviynt rule set. And it's gotten a lot of success, both with their internal audit and with their external audit teams. So, change the slide, Connor.
Yeah, if I could just elaborate on this slide a little bit too.
Absolutely.
Before we move on, I think not only the big thing to take home is that we can incorporate it, connect to these applications, consume the entire entitlement hierarchy, and you can write your segregation of duties risk policies, or more importantly, sensitive access risk policies on any entitlement in the Saviynt warehouse. For example, we have a lot of customers who want to implement a continuous control where anybody outside of the financial reporting group should not have access to the financial reporting SharePoint site or folder on the shared drive,
yes,
for example, right? So it is more implementing continuous controls to identify when there are exceptions to these access policies that you can put in place, right? It's not just about segregation of duties. It is extending those segregation of duties and risk analysis capabilities that you're used to in your access control solutions now to the entire enterprise. Right.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, there's so much that we can do in Saviynt, right? I mean, there's just so many different things that we can do from a preventative perspective, and the ability to identify audiences up front and who should have access to what is another level of GRC that Saviynt allows, right? If you can filter who has access to see these things in the first place, right, or have this particular access, now you can kind of preventively control, in addition to your provisioning catalog. Now you can prevent, who can even see it in the catalog as well, right? Is that what you're referring to there?
Exactly. That's definitely one part of it, right? So, thanks,
so
Chris.
I get excited. Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, I get excited because there's so many different things that you can do with each application, and you can just right size it for your organization, right? Because under the hood, Saviynt's got that flexibility. It's just a matter of how do we achieve what you need it to do, right? And that's where our conversations lead towards, and that's where testing and change management and production rollout comes a fly.
So I definitely wanted you to spend some time on helping potential customers build a business case on how to implement a solution like Saviynt. Okay.
Yeah, so this is really popular. This one's touchy because I didn't want to put real figures in here, obviously, but I wanted to show the audience that when we start talking to your organization, one of the first things that we do as part of that wheel that I talked about earlier in identifying your risk is how do you justify bringing in, Saviynt and Legion Star, right? How do you identify, first and foremost, how bad, not how bad, but like how costly it is within your environment to not be, implementing the tool like this first, right? What's your cost avoidance? And then we actually have a calculator that we go through line item by line item with your team. It can be a couple of different inputs, right? It can be IBM, for instance, as a vendor. It can be, your 1099s, whoever has the data, right? We sit down with them and we compile, all these numbers into the calculator, and we total it up, and we come up with, what is the total cost to your organization by avoiding automating a lot of these GRC processes, to avoiding, automating your identity access, right? And then we go into, the calculator, and we say, okay, that's your cost avoidance cost. What about, the savings that you would, incur if you were to actually, roll out something like a GRC tool? Let's not even talk about identity as a tool yet. First, let's just even maybe slide the GRC capabilities into your organization through Saviynt first, because we can connect to so many different applications. How much would that save you, per person, per contract, over the scale of 6 months or over the scale of 1 year, 10 years, whatever have you? And we can put those numbers in there alongside your management team and go to bat and, kind of communicate that up to your key executives and show them, how we got to these figures. And, it drives really that business value and that business case for why do we want to have demos, and why do we want to, bring the Saviynt and Legion Star teams over here to talk about, analyzing our environment, getting kind of a health check, right? So that we can find out what our roadmap looks like for the future to actually establish some of these savings and to avoid, these cost avoidance costs, if you will. So what's the next slide, Connor?
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. So I think we wanted just to walk through some examples of the application, right? So just to kind of talk through what it looks like in Saviynt. But I definitely think that was a good slide to talk about. I think Legion Star provides a lot of value to customers, and I've seen that really help them make the business case within their organization as to why they should implement a solution like Saviynt. Right? So thanks for that.
You got it. So we've been doing a lot of talking, right, Connor? So I just wanted to, make sure we got into some of the screenshots from the tool itself, so that we kind of show what we're talking about as well.
Agreed. And please, if anybody has any questions, feel free to enter them into the webinar application. So we'll be more than happy to answer those before we wrap up today. So like Chris said, I just wanted to have a few slides to talk about kind of what does that look like in Saviynt. And of course, if anybody is interested, we are more than happy to have a deep dive session with you to demo the solution and talk about how we may be able to help your organization. But so one of the concepts that I wanted to make sure you understood was Saviynt provides a risk violation workbench where you can manage all of your segregation of duties and sensitive access risk violations in one central place, right? So from here, you can slice and dice this data into any number of ways, right? You could filter based on a specific rule set that you have set up, or you can filter based on a specific system, right? Like an application that you have connected. You can also group by and report on how many risk violations by user, by risk, by which inherent role SOD violations, right? So a lot of these reports and kind of this workbench enables you to get a sense of your SOD violations, export these directly from the workbench, or search for a specific user. All of that can, and this is running in a continuous monitoring control manner, right? So typically we see organizations reconciling with their applications every night, getting the latest and greatest information, and then running the risk analysis so you have up-to-date data that you can report and act on. So from this screen, you can also select multi-select items or every single violation for a specific risk and take bulk action, right? This is, you can apply a mitigating control, for example, but you can also use these classification groupings on in process or closed, right? So think about that as to kind of help classify SOD violations as you work them through the remediation process, right? So if I click into one of those specific risk violations, this is where you see the details of that specific risk violation. In this example, where we're looking at a specific violation of a user who's violating the risk of enter purchase order release versus receive goods and services. So not only can we see at a high level what access they have, but we can see the specific fine-grained entitlements and what roles or responsibilities, in this case from Oracle, are they getting that access from. From this information is what is important and helpful when you're trying to remediate these SOD violations. This is a view to look at it on a risk by risk basis, but you can of course export this data and take a more holistic approach as well. From this screen, if you were to click the actions buttons that we're pointing to over here in the right side of the screen, you can you have a few options to look into this specific risk violation. I can click remediate, and that will bring me to a screen where I can have the option to submit a request to remove that access that's causing the SOD violation from one side or the other. I could apply a mitigating control, right? So Saviynt has a full mitigating control library that you can maintain and apply mitigating controls that you need to support evidence to the auditors, right? Same thing you would typically see. Mitigating controls can have expiration dates, mitigating control owners. We can have reports and dashboards to let you know when mitigating control assignments are expiring. All of those typical processes you need to manage SOD risk within your organization. Chris, I think spend a few to talk about the user access review process.
Yeah, I know we want to get to your next slides too, which are really important as part of that SOD cleanup, right? That you were trying to point the audience to, and one thing that hasn't been talked about yet is as now that you have that visibility to those SODs, now if you're taking them away, what does that do, right? Does that disable your business operations? Well, potentially, right? But Saviynt has other tools that Connor's going to get into that are, break glass-like or firefighter-like, that will help you kind of remediate your SODs, but, still allow your business operations to be fully functional. So just to touch on, kind of the other aspect, right? This is a screen that shows that you can digitize your user access reviews, right? Now you've got a single pane of glass where you're showing your management team for the system. These are the people that report to you, and these are the roles that they have assigned. What can we do with those people, right? First, you certify if they report to you. And then as you can see on the screen in blue, now we're certifying that they, yes, indeed, should have access to the roles that they do have, or no, pull it away, Saviynt. And Saviynt will automatically get rid of it for them. And all of that is kept in an audit trail, audit log for your internal and external team to go in and be able to view. So if there's any more questions on that, we can kind of, answer those at the end, or even schedule, some sort of a user access review demo just to kind of demonstrate the wild and numerous capabilities that Saviynt has here.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Just following our theme of identifying risk, right? One of the things to call out is that as part of the user access review process, because Saviynt has all of that risk information, we have the smart filters at the top that you can use to the reviewers can use to quickly filter out all of the access the users assigned and focus on that access that is causing SOD violations. Or that is, we also use advanced analytics to identify peer groups, right? So we can identify when someone has outlier access compared to their peers, right? So think about that as a user that used to be in accounting and then they moved to IT. So now compared to all of their peers in IT, that access they used to have in accounting definitely stands out as an outlier. So Saviynt uses analytics tools to help bring that risky access to the forefront.
That's a great point.
So,
that's another layer, worth considering.
Yep. And so as Chris mentioned, right, one of the tools that you can use during your remediation process is the implementation of privileged access management, or firefighter, like you would call, as known in SAP world. Saviynt allows you to standardize this privileged access management process across your infrastructure and SaaS, any application, SaaS application, or even SAP, right? So I had a quick video recording that I wanted to show just of Saviynt's new cloud PAM product that shows you how a customer can log into SAP for a privileged SAP session from Saviynt and launch a SAP GUI session directly from the browser without entering any password or anything. It's a credentialless login where Saviynt is maintaining that password and rotating it in a vault that we maintain. And pretty cool stuff that we'll wanted to just show everybody real quick to kind of wrap up the presentation today. So
hey Connor,
if we looked
even before you get started here, just a time check. Do we have enough time to cover off on that, Michelle and Connor, just to make sure we have one or two questions at the end?
We do have about 2 questions pending, so I think we'll have enough room for this.
Perfect.
Cool. I'll go through this video real quick, and then we'll answer those questions. So if we look at this is Saviynt version 6, our next version coming out. So the UI does look upgraded a little bit. But here we see the privileged sessions that a user has access to. Here, whether it's a EC2 instance in AWS or GCP, or here they have access to an SAP logon. So here we can watch them where they're clicking and they're accessing that SAP session, where they're gonna RDP into a session, and then now they've entered the SAP GUI from their browser and didn't have to enter any credentials, where Saviynt handled all of that in the back end. So here we see they're actually executing transactions in SAP. Here we're logging or jumping in as the PAM administrator, where they can see all the different sessions that they have going in the enterprise. Here you'll see this one session is live because this is a session that user has going right now. So that administrator can actually pull it up and see what is that user doing in real time, right? So here we're going to show they enter another transaction. If we go back to that screen, you'll see it's already updated, right? So now you'll see it's at SU01. So Saviynt is integrating all of the transaction code feeds, the change logs within SAP as well. So we still can conduct the firefighter log review process, but we're also adding the credentialless login, and you can even add video and session recording capabilities. Some of the cool stuff I wanted to point out, right, is that Saviynt, a user enters in the transaction codes they expect to enter in a privileged session, right, just like they would in GRC. But Saviynt also can identify where a user may be deviating from those transaction codes they said they were going to enter, right? So, and then as we go look at that, what that looks like in the firefighter log review portion, right? They can quickly sort in the filter on did they have any T codes that deviated from what they said they were going to enter, right? So it's Saviyn's tracking and analyzing all information, as well as bringing in the change logs to review what access or what changes did this user make, right? So I just wanted to end on here, and then we have 5 minutes left. Hopefully we can get these questions answered. Michelle?
I think real quick before you switch that slide, Connor, I think that's key, right? Because in a lot of GRC tools, even to this point, right, it's all about telling the system what you're going to use in free-form text, but then there's no evaluation other than a complex and time-intensive review by the reviewers themselves that have to go in after every session and look to make sure that nothing faulty was done, right? And there's no check against that initial set of T codes that the user said that they were going to use. So it takes down the amount of time that it takes to review considerably.
Yeah, good point, Chris.
So we do have a question that says, do you need to start with a clean HR system or Active Directory? And what are the best practices for cleanup before you enable cross-application SODs?
Good question. So Chris, do you want to take that, or you want?
Yeah, what was the first part of that?
Do you
Michelle?
need to start with a clean HR system or Active Directory?
So I would say you don't need to start with a clean, HR and Active Directory system. That should not be a hurdle that stops you from getting started, right? The Saviynt tool has visibility into everything, and you can narrow the search filters down to whatever you need it to view only and pull in only. So in fact, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll use the Saviynt tool set to help clean up the HR and Active Directory environments. So that's kind of the answer to question number one. It should absolutely not stop you, unless you have something else to add there, Connor.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. We have customers that use the analytics within Saviynt to help during those cleanup processes. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, you've got like this 30,000 foot view, and you can also go down to an inch level, right, to see the entitlements at a fine grain. So Active Directory and HR tools may not have that same, visibility and scaling up and down the security model curve. So it's pretty powerful, and it shouldn't stop you. And what was the second part, Michelle?
The second part was, what are the best practices for cleanup before you enable cross-application SODs?
So I think some of the best practices are really I really teach my customers, right, or kind of tell them, you need to look at it from the auditor's point of view, right? An auditor is going to look at your end-to-end business process and identify where the risk or segregation of duty risk lies in that business process. And then you work backwards and chase and track down what applications support those business processes. And that's really where Saviynt can then help you get to the details and put together a holistic rule set to kind of help you manage those risks across business processes. That's my
point. And to piggyback off of that too, I think that was strategy. Tactical wise, what we've found a lot of success in is identifying what the high risk SODs are, connect Saviynt to it, right? Identify what those are, see if you can get rid of some low hanging fruit that makes the most sense from a business value standpoint, right? Whether that's people that are actually doing these actions, or whether it's highly sensitive and you need to take it away from them right away. That's probably the first step for us on the professional services side. And then, secondly, we would point you to cleaning up your roles first. You clean up your roles. Now you've got clean roles, not dirty roles that perpetuate the problem. And then you can clean up the users thereafter.
Yep. So Michelle, what was our last question real quick? Hopefully we can get it in.
Our last question is there dashboarding options for SOD or sensitive access?
Yes. So good question. So yes, Saviynt has a full analytics module where we can create, or we have out of the box reports and dashboards related to all risk violations within the warehouse, right? So yes, the answer is definitely yes.
Excellent. Okay. Well, with that, We are out of time. We really appreciate the questions from our attendees. We wish you a lot of health, a lot of safety. Take care of yourself and your families, and you should be seeing this, a recording to this webinar in your email within 24 hours. Please do be sure to check your junk mail or your spam folder. And on that note, I will say thank you to both Connor and Chris for their presentation today, and wish everybody a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.